Welcome everyone to the Bucket Courses. My name is Sarah Smith. I work in the Office of Community Partnerships Planning and Research at Grinnell College. I have the honor of partnering with the Bucket Course Committee to bring you these awesome courses each and every week on Wednesday. A few reminders before we get started. Please make sure to silence your phones. Please, if you have a T-coil, you can turn that on now so you can hear through the microphones. When we're finished, if you have a chance to put the chairs away, that would be great. And then one more thing too, today, a little bit different, we'll take some questions right before we take a break at 10:40, and then we'll take more questions before the end of it, about 11:15, 11:20, something like that as well. So you don't have to save all your questions till the end. One other request that I do have for you is I am working hard on making sure everyone knows each and every week that who's presenting and what topics we're presenting on for these courses. And I know there's a lot of frustration because it's not always where I want it to be or you want it to be. But please know one place that I have full control over is the CEC Bucket Course website. So you can always go there and find out what classes we have. We actually now have classes scheduled until the end of May. So really, really excited to have a lot of different community members come and present. So please check there, but I'm working hard. If you email me and have suggestions as to what we should do, I'd love to hear that feedback. So, all right. Without further ado, I'm very excited today to welcome the Office of International Student Affairs from Grinnell College and their talk about how we celebrate International Women's Day around the world. And really excited to have Grinnell College students here talking about how they celebrate this day in their home and sharing that knowledge with all of us. So excited to have you here today, but we're going to start off first with Emily. Emily's going to talk a little bit about the office. And I'm just going to let you go with whatever topics you have in mind. So can you please help me welcome Emily?
Hi, all. Thank you so much for having us this morning. As Sarah said, my name is Emily Perry. I work in the Office of International Student Affairs. And as she said, we will talk a little bit about International Women's Day. And in our research about this day, we also may shift a little bit into allowing the students to talk about women that they admire from their homes. So that way we can kind of celebrate International Women's Day by learning about some really important people. First, I think we'll start by introducing ourselves. Do you all want to come stand right here really quick?
Hi, so I'm Muskan. I'm from Kolkata, India, and I study in Grinnell College. I am majoring in psychology in Grinnell, and yeah, that's me.
Hi everyone, I'm Sheilla Muligande. I'm from Kigali, Rwanda. I'm also a student at Grinnell. I'm a second year and I'm doubling in computer science and English.
Hi, I'm Tai or Taina. I am from São Paulo, Brazil, and I'm also a second year, just like the both of them. But I am a political science major and sociology major with a Latin American studies concentration.
Hi, I'm Liam. I'm from South Korea. I'm a freshman. My intended major is philosophy and political science. Yeah, thank you.
All right, you all are welcome to sit. Thank you. So we'll kind of get started by just talking a little bit about what International Women's Day is and a little bit of history to share. So International Women's Day is a global day that's been observed since about 1911. It's a time to celebrate the social and economic, cultural, and political achievements of women while also serving as a time to name different challenges women still face and call for more steps towards gender equality. In the early 1900s, there was an international socialist women's conference at which one of the leaders, a German woman named Clara Zetkin, proposed that every year in every country there should be a day to press for women's demands. After this meeting, some of the European countries in attendance, like Austria, Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland, observed International Women's Day on March 19th, 1911, with more than 1 million people attending the rallies. The actual date, though, actually, I don't know if I've mentioned it. The actual date is March 8th, that is celebrated today. And that date was chosen later in observation of a 1917 strike in Russia for bread and peace, protesting the deaths of Russian soldiers in World War I. This strike was held on March 8th, 1917, according to the Gregorian calendar, but in some other spaces you may see that it was held in late February, and that's because Russia was using the Julian calendar at that time. In 1975, the United Nations recognized International Women's Day for the first time, and in December 1977, a few years later, they adopted a resolution to officially recognize that day and celebrate it, and all of the days that are observed in each member state in accordance with their historical and national traditions that recognize women's rights and international peace. This is kind of a nice balance, I thought, to have a global day where we all focus on global issues around the world related to women, while also recognizing that there are so many member states who have been doing this work in their own cultural context for so many years in unique ways. As you can see, there's a logo right up top, and that is the logo of an organizing body that kind of streamlines information about International Women's Day each year. They have a website that talks about different kind of guiding principles that they like to use for the day. They pick a theme each year to focus and kind of maybe narrow the conversation based on the events that are happening. And then they also have kind of a repository of events that are happening around the world. So I think one thing that we recognize in our own conversation is that a lot of students don't necessarily know if there are specific ways that home celebrates International Women's Day, but you can go to this space of events and see if there are actually things you might not know are happening. But as a kind of shift into that, as I was seeking out more information about how this day is observed, it became clear that the observation of this day can really shift context to context, culture to culture, and year to year, based on what's happening around the world. This might take the form of marches and protests, summits or forums about various topics, or just various smaller celebrations and times of recognition for women's accomplishments. I will talk about a few examples, but I also wanted to say last year at Grinnell, one thing that we did was gather a little bit of extra information about how International Women's Day is celebrated from students' homes, and so I might also refer to some of the things that I learned from them along the way. The three topics that I put here as well are some of the guiding principles that the International Women's Day kind of organizing body has set forth that help kind of organize how this day functions. And two of them are a little bit similar in some ways, but I thought I just wanted to break it up a little bit easier. So the first is celebration. China is one of the only countries that I have found that has kind of a more legalized, structured celebration each year. And that is just that they offer a half day of work for women on March 8th. And then they also really like to offer in the markets discounts for women throughout the day. In Vietnam, Vietnam is one of the countries that does have a historical day that they like to celebrate women prior to International Women's Day being recognized, and that is October 20th. And so Amy Nguyen, a current third year at Grinnell, helped us learn that in Vietnam, International Women's Day is also considered a day to commemorate the uprising of the Trung sisters, the first two heroic national female generals who repelled the foreign invaders from the north. This day traditionally inspired the national spirit and the will to fight in Vietnamese women. And the occasion is celebrated often by giving women flowers, typically roses, along with other gifts. And school, workplaces, and organizations may hold some types of events in recognition. by raising awareness. One of our fourth years, Hannah Kim, talked about her home of South Korea. And though they may not celebrate it in the household, she noted that on the government level from 1984, the Korean Women Workers Association and the National Women Trades Union have organized the Korea Women's Congress, conducting commemoration ceremonies, women's festivals, street marches, and cultural festivals. And then I also thought I would include Des Moines, as this year I found that there was a rally downtown near the Women of Achievement Bridge focusing on topics of women's health, career and relationships and networking, and there was a market that focused on women-owned businesses in the area, just in case we're curious about what's happening in our own home. The last that I'll focus on is mobilizing action. Both in Pakistan and Turkey, there may be marches or protests organized in honor of the challenges women still face in those spaces. In Turkey, despite a protest ban, thousands of Turkish citizens gathered in Istanbul in March 2024 in protest of the lacking women's rights and the number of femicides the country saw in the previous year. Hizal Zengar, a recent alum, taught us that the color purple, as you can see in the photo up top, is worn to represent female solidarity. And the feminist movement in Turkey is highly conscious of the common goal that women, ethnic, racial minorities, LGBTQ plus people, and workers have in the country. In Pakistan, and that image down below is from the most recent Aurat March. It's a demonstration held typically on March 8th, though this year in particular it was held a little, some of the gatherings were held a little bit earlier as March 8th fell during Ramadan, and so they wanted to move it a little bit ahead of time. And so this is a list of demands that they asked for on that day, and I'll read a little bit of what's written. They demand the end of the erasure of women, religious and ethnic and gender minorities, as well as political descendants from public life. As a first step, we demand that people who resisted patriarchy and state oppression be honored in our educational curricula, museums, and archives without sanitizing the causes. The last example I will give is Mexico. And in 2020, often you'll see in Mexico that there is a march on March 8th. And in 2020, there was one of over 800,000 people. But the next day, they added a step further on March 9th and called for Un Día Sin Nosotras, which is a day without us. So women did not go to work, they stayed home and made no purchases. With only about 10% participation reported, it's possible, the reports have said that it made an economic impact of 30 million pesos, or about $1.8 million. There are also so many spaces around the world, two prevalent examples being the Gaza Strip or Ukraine, where observation of this day is deeply impacted by conflict, violence, and war, where your needs and goals may be focused simply on survival. There is so much deep grief and trauma, but strong pride in where you call home that impacts how you define womanhood through that. So I just wanted to say that as well. Moving into where the students are going to talk today, the way that we have kind of found one really easy but powerful way to celebrate International Women's Day at Grinnell is to share the stories of the women that we know and admire. It's just a really wonderful time to learn about each other, as well as learn about different individuals that we may not learn about in our history classes, just in everyday life. And so the privilege that we have of being in relationship with one another at Grinnell, we are able to learn about so many amazing people. And so the students are going to present on some of the folks that they admire today to help you celebrate International Women's Day. And with that, I think I'll hand the mic to Ty.
I will try this. So I'm starting with kind of a rhetorical question, but if you're, what do they call it, a movie connoisseur, or if you just really like movies, you might be aware that we had a Brazilian movie that won the international category of films at the Oscars. And that movie is I'm Still Here, and it actually tells the story of the woman that I'm about to talk about, called Eunice Paiva. But before, I wanted to give you a little bit of context to the historical momentum that was happening in Brazil at that time. So as you might know, in the 60s, we had the Cold War, we had the Cuban Revolution, and all of that emerged in Latin America. And specifically, when I'm thinking of South America, in 4 countries, we had dictatorships largely impacted by the United States, in Argentina, in Chile, in Brazil. And in Brazil in particular, it's interesting how the dictatorship really affected women. So in 1932, we have this slide that women got the right to vote. In actuality, it was only white women, because you still had to know how to read and write to be able to vote. But right after, we have this momentum of student political movements where women were a really big part of these universities. It was usually social sciences courses, so they were mostly taken by women. But we had in 1964 a dictatorship coup. Our dictatorship was by different dictators, so it changed throughout. But in 1968, we had the Institutional Act number 5. So what that meant, to not overcomplicate too much, is everyone lost habeas corpus. So you did not have the right to be free or to be right, even if you did not have any kind of pointer to you that you really did anything wrong. The dictatorship ended in 1985, and in 1985, that's when all women really got the right to vote. And about women participation, 11% of the individuals who were killed or disappeared were women. So it's extremely important to also think about those who we kind of forget. And Eunice Paiva in specific, she's a symbol of the struggle against the military dictatorship in Brazil. Kind of forgotten. Usually people end up thinking of her husband more than her. He actually even has like a statue of himself on the Congress building in Brazil. But Eunice Paiva, she was an advocate for human rights and indigenous rights. She was born in São Paulo. She had a literature bachelor degree, but she was married to Rubens Paiva, who, before the dictatorship, he was a congressman for the Workers' Party, which till this day is associated to the left-winging. They had to be exiled when the dictatorship started, but they went back to Brazil. And as the movie tells, Rubens Paiva was captured and he disappeared. There are not really reports. There's estimates of when he might have unfortunately passed away, but they denied his death for as long as she fought for it. So Eunice actually and her 15-year-old daughter were also arrested. So Eunice stayed about 15 days in one of the centers, and she was questioned herself. If you're wondering what her husband did that was so terrible, he was passing notes from people who were exiled in Chile to their families, and that was all he did to deserve this. But Eunice didn't stop there, or she didn't let the tragedy take over her. So at 48 years old, as she became a widow and she had like 5 children to take care of, she got a law degree in Brazil and started working for the rights of both indigenous people, but she was working for the death certificate of her husband. So majority of her life after that was spent in that fight. She became a specialist in indigenous law. She actually worked for the United Nations, which is very hard for a Brazilian to do as a context. And she was fighting against the dictatorship's policies because we had this different movement in Brazil, very different from, for example, Argentina, where we only had a commission of truth, meaning a sentencing or really looking into it, in 2012. So very long after, and she was fighting for that from the get-go. And she was actually a consultant for the National Constituent Assembly, so in part we have to thank her for our constitution. And so about the late life, so after 25 years of struggle, she managed to get the death certificate, which is actually this picture right here of her smiling is her holding her husband's death certificate. Unfortunately, she lived with Alzheimer's for 14 years, and she passed away at 86. But she's still remembered as a symbol of resistance and justice for women. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about what she really means to me outside of this general history lesson that I just gave you. So I actually learned about dictatorship, and I still remember when I did. I was in middle school in 6th grade or 7th grade, and I had a professor named Cynthia. And she read some excerpts from testimonies out loud for us, which also very radical for you to do to like a 13-year-old, but it definitely taught me what it was. And I immediately got troubled by the fact some in my country still call it a revolution and talk about miracle in the economy. And there are a lot of people, it wasn't only her husband, we also had a journalist called Herzog, who his wife also fought for him afterwards. So there was really a big push of these women for justice for both their husbands, their sons, their daughters, but also we had those daughters, like I mentioned, in the universities. And this really inspired me to pursue a career in journalism in Latin America and to talk about what's happening in Latin America, because sometimes we kind of forget and journalism isn't taken as seriously there as it is here, even though here maybe not that much anymore. And that's what actually managed to make me a concentrator in Latin American studies at Grinnell, and what inspired me to, I'll be taking a spring study abroad in Chile, and I'll be doing my own independent research on the Brazilian dictatorship. But as just a conclusion, women like Eunice Paiva really paved the way for me to have courage to speak up and also to learn about what happens in the country, which currently it's really a privilege to be educated and to be able to speak about it naturally to people without having to read out loud. And I actually did learn from really good professors, so I'm very thankful for that. And yeah, that's it. I'll pass along to Sheilla.
Okay, I'm going to try to make my person as captivating as Ty's. But I'm going to be talking about Cécile Kayirebga, and she's Rwandan. She was born in 1946 in Rwanda, and she's mostly known for her art of music. She's a singer, songwriter, and an ethnomusicologist. You may be wondering what an ethnomusicologist is. And it's basically a person who studies, or in Cecile's case, who makes music that is related or that has the essence of that person's culture. And in this case, Cecile's culture was Rwandan culture. So she's known for her music, for me, really was, in essence, Rwandan. She was telling the story of Rwanda, but she was also talking to Rwandans, which is very important for me, and I'll get more into that later. But here I said that she moved to Belgium in the 1970s as a part of a migration wave of Rwandans that were basically fleeing the country because of ethnic tensions that were rising and a pretty extremist government that was taking place in Rwanda. But she moved to Belgium, and she lived in a couple places in Europe, but she basically lived in Belgium for most of her life. Eventually she moved to Rwanda, and she still lives in Rwanda now. But she was pretty known for spreading Rwandan music and Rwandese culture in Europe and in Belgium. So her music is pretty interesting because it's a blend of very old traditional Rwandan sounds, I'll play some music later, and more modern influences. But when she was in Belgium, she was a part of this group called Les Muses, that's in French, the Muses. And this is when she continued her music career where she was spreading Rwandan music along with her Rwandan sisters. But as I said here, she's known for spreading Rwandan music in Europe and globally. And here I included 3 images. One is the center one, obviously a really beautiful drawing of her. But this one in the center, I really just wanted to showcase how she was spreading Rwandan tradition, not just musically, but also, as you can see, her singers and herself are in traditional Rwandan attire. And it just shows how she was not afraid of showing her pride in her culture, even when she was literally exiled from the country. And lastly, over there, we have a really beautiful picture. It's, as you can guess, Rwanda. And that's mainly what she talks about. She really talks about the beauty of the country. I'll go a little bit more into that later, but I just kind of wanted to show you the theme of her music and what she really wants to talk about. So, to her music, I want to talk a little bit about what her music points to. So her main themes include nostalgia, specifically nostalgia for one's homeland, which I will explain in a little bit. But I'd like to turn the attention towards Cecile's actual voice. I'll show that in the next slide. But her music, it advocated for two things. One, it advocated at the time that she was making it for a return of all of the Rwandans that were forcefully exiled out of the country back into the country. And two, in a more in a larger scope, it advocated for the cultural preservation of Rwanda amidst a changing world. And as I said, she gained international recognition for those missions of hers. And lastly, and this I think pertains a lot to me, but she has really, and she continues to influence younger artists and younger generation to keep the traditional music of Rwanda and to not just forget it. Because I think she can attest to the fact that a forgetting of one's culture can lead to the division that she witnessed in Rwanda and that she lived through. But I want to turn to her voice so that she can tell you herself why she did what she did, why she chose to transfer her message through music. So I'll show you a little video.
naratangaraga nabonaga u Rwanda uko rusa nkatangara noneho usanga ari ukubiririmba nta kindi cyabimvana mu mutwe ndeba imisozi ndeba ibibaya ndeba u Rwanda uko rusa numva kwibohora ni igikorwa gikomeye cyane mu mateka y'u Rwanda gikomeye cyagiriye abantu benshi neza cyakijije n'abandi ndetse bagombaga gupfa urumva ariko uzi umuntu uguheza inyuma y'igihugu cyawe wavukiyemo ari abanyarwanda nkatwe bakajya ku mipaka bagatega bakatubuza kwinjira nakubwira rwose muri icyo gihe naje mu Rwanda nka gatatu cyangwa kane ari ugutoroka uko nahunze niko ninjiraga ku mipaka iyo ariyo yose.
Yeah. There it is. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what you just said in case you couldn't see the captions. But there are really three main things. One is the fact that this woman was exiled from the country. She lived a big part of her life outside of the country. She raised her kids outside of the country, and she still managed to make music that was very accurate and that spoke very precisely about Rwanda, which in my opinion, and I think in most people's opinion, is a very hard task to undertake because she's not present in the place. How do you speak about a place that you don't necessarily know? And she still managed to do that, and all of her music is extremely accurate. It's very telling of the Rwandan essence. The second thing is, as she spoke about Rwandan liberation, she wanted to talk about an accurate history. And what she wanted the most was that she would teach history through her music, but also that history would be taught in schools in Rwanda. And she did this, again, mostly for the youth and for the generations that were born after the liberation struggle of Rwanda, so that, again, they could understand the history of Rwanda and so that the events that happened would not be reproduced. And the events that happened in this case were the ethnic tensions that were colonially installed in Rwanda and that eventually led to a genocide in 1994 that killed almost 1 million people in 100 days. And the last thing, again, is that, again, she was denied entry into the motherland, and she said that during that time of exile, she only entered Rwanda about 3 or 4 times, and each of those times she had to enter Rwanda hidden, so nobody could know about her, otherwise she would either get jailed or killed. So again, I think the reason for her music is very powerful, and it also takes a lot of energy. This woman is incredible. So now we're going to move on to the actual music, but I just want to talk a little bit about the centerpiece here. Cécile is the one in the very middle in the beautiful orange dress, and she's surrounded by these beautiful ladies. They're young girls, and they're singing with her. And I think this is, again, really telling of her mission to collaborate with the youth, but also to tell a story with the youth. And as you can see, they're dressed in traditional Rwandan clothes, and it really does show how she wants her music to showcase Rwandan traditions. So the first song that we're gonna listen to is called Rwanda, and it's in Kinyarwanda, so you'll only be listening to like the sounds, but I will be translating a little bit. So we'll listen to some excerpts. So again, this song is called Rwanda. It's, I guess the best way to translate it is that it's an ode to Rwanda. So she's doing two things. First of all, she's talking to Rwanda, the country and its landscape, not necessarily the people. And she's talking about how beautiful the country is. So she's basically, I guess we can say, flirting with the country. She's talking about the mountains, and she's talking about how those mountains, the mountains of Rwanda, have a very special place in her heart. But more importantly, later she repeats the word ndaje, and the word ndaje means I'm coming, which essentially is her making a promise to Rwanda that she will eventually return. And this is very important, not just on a personal level, because again, Cécile Kayirebwa was in exile, but it's very important because she was a part of a large group of people that were exiled from the country. So it is said that actually the soldiers that were on the front and that were fighting for the liberation of Rwanda stuck this song to their ear in hopes that they would one day be able to return to the country with their families. So this song, I'd like to say that it's almost a second national anthem to Rwanda, because it really does tell a story of migration and a promise that was thankfully later fulfilled. And the second song is called Tarihinda. I'm gonna play that as well. So this second song is actually used in weddings, and I still kind of don't understand why. But it's, I guess, representing Rwanda as the bride that one wants. So it's, again, presenting Rwanda in this really beautiful view so as to encourage people to go back to Rwanda. And for context, she was making these songs before and during the liberation movement. So her goal really was to give people as much motivation as possible to keep going into the country, to keep fighting for the liberation of Rwanda. But also she was thinking of something generational. She was thinking of, how am I going to be able to tell the history of a country for later generations, for when the country's finally liberated. And I guess that's going to go into a little bit of why I chose her and why she's special to me. So for context, I was born in Rwanda, but I left the country when I was 6 years old. So I did not grow up, I did not spend the majority of my life in Rwanda. And I remember one of my most valuable childhood memories outside of Rwanda was whenever I was in a car with my parents, they would play CDs of Cécile Kayirebwa. And I think, number one, it taught me Kinyarwanda really well, because it uses old Kinyarwanda, and I sound eloquent now because of her music. But also, those messages that she had, again, for people that were during the liberation movement still apply to a person like me who was born well after the liberation movement, because it conveyed a message of nostalgia for one's country. Again, I was not in Rwanda, but through her music, I felt the need to go back to Rwanda, to give back to Rwanda, and most importantly, to remember Rwanda. And to her, for me, Cécile Kayirebwa is part of the reason why I value Rwanda, even as a person that has not spent most of her life in Rwanda. So she's very valuable to me and to most young people in the diaspora, and she continues to be. And to me, that's the most important part of Cécile Kayirebwa, her ability to pervade throughout Rwandan history, even as she made her music during the liberation. So that's Cécile Kayirebwa, and I hope you enjoyed that.
I seriously don't know what I do with my microphone. Okay, we'll deal with that later. Okay, is that what happened? Okay, I was sitting there like, what did I do with this? Okay, phew. All right. First and foremost, we'll take questions if anyone has any questions, but you guys did an amazing job. That is not easy to do, and yeah, you did such a great job. Thank you, thank you. I would never have been able to do that at your age, so I was so impressed, not only with what you presented, but just how you present it. So congratulations. That's not easy to do. Any questions? Yes, we have a question.
Thank you all for that amazing talk and context on International Women's Day. And wow, I'm just boggled by the amount of information. Like, what a gift. Thank you to Ty and Sheilla. Is that your name? Okay, great. I had a question about Cecile, the musician. I guess it's two. Did she collaborate with other Rwandan musicians in Belgium? And how was her music initially received in Rwanda when it was coming out?
Can you hear me? Okay. So the first, I guess I'll stand up. The first question was collaboration with other Rwandan musicians in Belgium. So first of all, she was born in Rwanda and then she was exiled, right? So she already had a childhood of Rwandan traditional music. And then when she was in Belgium, she was in the group that I mentioned, Les Muses, where she was with her friends, and she continued to make Rwandan music. So part of her work was with her sisters. But later when she came to fame, I guess, she still collaborated with musicians. Even in Rwanda, she collaborates with musicians. And she emphasizes working with the younger people because those are the people that will have the ability to carry her story. And then the second question was, how was her music received, right? So, of course, in Rwanda, during that time, the government was extremist and they were against her. So her music was not received well at all by the government. But again, by the front, by the people that were trying to go into Rwanda and liberate the country, it was very well received, especially the military and the people who were actively in the front and trying to enter the country. She, I think, was a symbol of hope for them. I'll say that a lot of the people who were, if you talk to the people that were in the front during that time, they will refer to her as Maman Cécile, which means Mom Cécile. And because I think they see her as a figure that was really nurturing them and helping them sort of move through a very difficult time in their lives and through Rwandan history. So yeah.
Yes.
Sheila, I have one more follow-up on that topic as well. What do you know about prior to Cece's life? What was the tradition of women's role in music? How did they use music? Was she an innovator with the way she used music, or was she carrying on a tradition of women in Rwanda?
That's such a good question. So prior to her lifetime, music was actually a man's role, kind of, especially because of instruments. So the instruments that she tries to convey are the two traditional Rwandan instruments, which are irembe and ikanza, and those are both mostly played by men. I don't think I've ever seen a woman play those instruments. So the fact that she incorporated those instruments into her music is already like very innovative. So I guess in that sense is innovative, and she's bringing something that was traditionally not for women into a women's space.
Ty, I have a question for you. Very similar. I'm curious about the film that won. International. Tell me.
Best international movie.
And it was recognized though by the
Oscars Academy.
Oscars here in the United States. So how is the film received in Brazil? How is it also? So it was received awards here, but I'm curious how that is received back. Back in Brazil.
So in Brazil, and I guess even outside of the United States and Brazil, it got so many awards, like an incredible amount. The director, Walter Salles, is very respected. He's in a position of power also. He's like a very rich heir to a bank. So the movie was made with a lot of help, and I think that really impacted why people liked it. But I will say I have scrolled through Google ratings, so of course it's mostly popular with the people who believe the dictatorship was a thing. The group that still calls it a revolution does call it leftist propaganda, so take what you will. But on the side of historians and that kind of people, they all really enjoyed the movie, and it was taken as a really good ode to history. There wasn't fiction involved. So,
yeah, thank you for I was going to ask that as a follow-up of how it was received by everyone, and that I can understand.
As a movie buff, is the movie available here and in what context?
So not yet. It was in Des Moines for a really quick second, but not yet. I think it'll probably be available on Hulu or something because I saw they have a Nora. But I know that as soon as the movie rights are able to be bought, we have a Brazilian Student Association at Grinnell, which I'm the president for, and our goal is to actually buy the movie rights to have a screening here at Grinnell. So maybe next semester you'll hear about it.
Great. And can you call me when you have those rights?
Yes.
And then we can either show it here or we have a partnership with the Strand downtown. So maybe that would be great to show the movie there when you have it. So that would be wonderful. One last question, Ty, for you again. The story about your teacher. Love teachers. I don't think they get enough credit. So it was really wonderful that you gave her credit. Was that a picture of her? Can you go back to that? Was that her in that picture, or maybe not?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
But I am still in contact with her, so we do DM talk still.
Awesome.
I still talk to my middle school teachers. I don't know what that says about me, but she still lives in my city. She's a very interesting person. She also does activism, especially like rap. So she goes to like rap battles about feminism and women's rights. Very fun person.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, it says very good things about you. I think that you're still in contact with teachers, and I'm sure they're very proud of you. So, all right. Well, let's take a little bit of a break, and we'll resume back here like a little bit before, maybe about 55. Sorry, we took a little bit more time for questions, but about 10 minutes. Okay. Thank you. But let's get moving so we can get out of here by 11:30. Perfect. We'll make sure you have plenty of time for presentations and questions. All right. Is that one on? Yes. Perfect. Okay. All right. I'm I'm excited. My brain's already full, but I'm excited to learn more, of course, of the next two presentations. So I do think, Bob, let's turn off. I think it's easier if you're okay. We'll turn off these lights so we can see the screen a little bit more. But okay, thanks everyone, and I will pass it over. Liam, is that right? Okay, Liam.
Nice to meet you. To introduce me again, I'm Liam. I'm from Seoul, South Korea, and today I'm gonna. And today I'm gonna present. I'm gonna do a presentation about Ryu Sun, and one of the most significant figures in Korea's independence movement during 1910 to 1945 under Japanese Empire. She embodies the spirit of Korean independence and was also a pioneering woman who demonstrated agency in a society heavily influenced by Confucianism, which means very patriarchal and like really small room for women to act at society. More than that, despite being a student, Yu Guanshun, she actively planned and participated in various independence movements, making a lasting impact on even modern Korea. To fully understand her contributions, we must first examine the historical context of Korea before and after her life. So I want to begin with 1910. What happened in Korean? Actually, it was Korea Empire at that time. So 1910, the year when Korea lost its sovereignty. After the Russo-Japanese War ended, Japan signed a treaty that allowed them to interfere in Korean affairs under the pretense of mutual agreement. However, in 1905, based on the treaties after the Russo-Japanese War, Japan forcibly imposed the Second Japan-Korea Agreement on the Korean Empire. They used their army, like fully armed soldier, around the palace of the Korean Empire, and they just forcibly imposed to sign the treaty. This agreement stripped Korea of its diplomatic rights and placed its internal affairs under Japan's control. The Korean Emperor refused to approve the treaty, but Japan used the signature of Korea's foreign minister as justification for its enforcement. So, and by 1910, Japan had completely excluded the Korean Emperor from treaty negotiations and forced the pro-Japanese Korean Prime Minister to sign the Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty of 1910. With this treaty, the Korean Empire ceased to exist and Korea was officially annexed by Japan Empire. This slide shows an excerpt from the original treaty. So, Article 1, His Majesty the Emperor of Korea makes the complete and permanent cession to His Majesty the Emperor of Japan of all rights of sovereignty over the whole of Korea. Article 2, His Majesty the Emperor of Japan accepts the cession mentioned in the preceding article and consents to the complete annexation of Korea to the Empire of Japan. If you study this article, you can find that there are a lot of articles about what Emperor of Korea should do after this treaty. But to emphasize it again, they didn't get the sign from Emperor of Korea, but just a Foreign Minister of Korea, but they say this was justified by his sign. And so as a result of this treaty, the Korean royal family permanently lost its authority, and the 500-year-old dynasty that had ruled Korea came to an end. The annexation led to severe economic exploitation as Korean farmland and labor were forcibly taken, with harvests sent cheaply to Japan. Koreans were also prevented from establishing businesses, leaving them economically isolated. Culturally, Japan implemented the private school ordinance, which is banning Korean language education in Korea. Koreans were forced to learn and use Japanese, further erasing our Korean cultural identity. These slides depict everyday life in Korea under Japanese rule. The image on the left is actually the photo of school class. But if you see this part of the photo, there are two men holding the sword right in front of them. They're actually the teacher of the school. They just changed every school rule so that every teacher and every officer is in school to possess sword and those weapons. In some case, if Korean students use Korean or they refuse to learn Japanese. And the right image shows the Japanese colonial government of Korea building. This building was more than just an administrative center for colonial rule of Japanese empire. So that building is right here. If you see the building, a sharp-eyed viewer might notice a resemblance between its shape and a particular character in the Japanese writing system, which is this one and that one. Yeah. So that letter is a Chinese character for sun, which Japan incorporated into the building's design as a symbol of dominance. But more significantly, this building was strategically placed to block the view of the Korean imperial palace, symbolically crushing the legacy of the Korean monarchy. So, amid this oppression, a major resistance movement emerged in 1919, which is 9 years after the 1910 treaty. And the main event was the March 1st movement of 1919, which marked Korea's first organized effort to overthrow Japanese rule. And today, I'm going to present about Yu Gun-sun, who she were at the like a core of the movement. She was at the center, and she actually led this movement and few more movements after this, following this March 1st independence movement of Korea at 1919. So, she born in 1902. She grew up in a Christian family, which was really rare in Korea at the time. Thanks to her grandfather's influence, she attended Ihwa Academy, a Christian girls' school in Seoul, which is really, really rare. Because in Korea, there was no school for girls, no school based on Christianity. So basically, that school is just like a 1 in a million. It was really rare chance to get into that school, but she did it thanks to her grandfather's influence with the principal of the Ihwa Academy. In a society where Confucian traditions discouraged female education, she became an independent thinker and participated in student movements protesting the Second Japan-Korea Agreement of 1905. So her active involvement in the independence movement began in 1919, following the death of Emperor Gojong on January 21st. Believing that his death was linked to Japanese oppression, Yu Gun-sun and her classmates joined the March 1st movement at 1919. This was a nationwide protest for independence. On March 5th, she and other students organized another demonstration, leading to her first arrest. She was soon released, but the Japanese government responded by issuing a nationwide school closure order on March 10th, forcing her to return her home. Back in her hometown, she secretly printed independence declarations and made Korean flags, organizing another protest on April 1st. This protest was met with brutal repression. Over 30 people were injured, and 19 were killed, including Yu Gun-sun's parents. Despite her grief, she was arrested and sentenced to 3 years in prison on June 30. Many of her fellow detainees appealed their sentences, but Yu Gun-sun refused to appeal because she did not recognize Japan's authority over Korea, and that's why she declined to appeal after her 3-year sentence. So 6 months later, on the first anniversary of the March 1st movement, Yu Gun-sun led another independence protest inside the prison, along with thousands of other detainees. On September 28, 1920, she died in prison at just 18 years old. The exact cause of her death is unknown, but historians agreed that she suffered relentless torture and malnutrition during her imprisonment. So there's a video of the prison she was imprisoned at her time, which is.
Todemon prison was one of the explicit tools of oppression Japan used to sever the flow of the independence movement of Chosun. After being imprisoned, patriots were inhumanly tortured, often resulting in their death.
Well, this box with needle is actually the tool for torture. So Japanese Empire, they locked person into that box and kicked and hit it that box so that they can damaged by needle.
In the prison factories, prisoners were forced to work and produce military supplies.
That's where she imprisoned, and still many historians argue that there were many more torture tools in that prison, and they have like specialized tools for torture based on their like if the prisoner was Goel, then they would use that tool. If they were like tall guy, they would use that tool kind of way. But yeah. Introducing every kind of torture tools in this presentation is not that related, so I just excluded it. But if you search or Google a little bit, you can find a lot of what they did in Korea during that season. Yep. So anyway, at that prison, Yu Guan-sun died at 1920, and actually Japanese Empire. They fearing the international backlash that could arise from her death, because as I mentioned before, Ewha Academy is established by those Christianity and pastors from America. So they fearing the international backlash if some people or Ewha Academy's people actually make it public about her death. So the Japanese government, they refused to return her body to her family. However, thanks to the efforts of her school principal at Ewha Academy, her remains were eventually returned to Ewha Academy. Actually, most of the photographs of Yu Guan-sun that exist today were actually prison records taken during her incarceration. But the only surviving photograph of her before her imprisonment is shown on the right, which is found at 2020 at, I forgot the exact name of the university, but some university in U.S. I heard. Yep. And but what she did in Korea, it not only defied the Japanese Empire, but also inspired generations of student-led protests in South Korea. Her actions set a precedent for student activism, which played a crucial role in fighting military dictatorships and protecting democracy in modern Korea. This one is the most. It was the biggest student activism throughout Korean history, it was 1972. And the president, he illegally got the position of president based on coup. And those students came out the street and they started to protest. And this photo is actually the funeral of the student activist named Hanye Lee, which you can find in the photo of the right. He hit it by the tear gas directly, and he died at that place right after he been hit by the tear gas. And they started that funeral, and a few years later, the president did another terrible thing in Korea, but still, again, those students, not only just college students, but also high school students, they came out the street, protested a lot, but most of these protests were based on the influence of what Yugansun did during Japanese Empire. Japanese Empire occupied in Korean Empire. So yeah, she was a young, oppressed schoolgirl in a male-dominated society of Korean Empire. Yet she fearlessly led the fight for freedom. Even today, her call for independence continues to resonate deeply with Koreans. And yeah, thank you.
Hello. So I'm Muskan, and after all the amazing, empowering women that were just talked about, I want to go off the path a little and talk about someone who is not a human woman but is a goddess. So when you think of a god, who do you think of? I'm assuming that for most of you, it must be a male persona, but when I think of God, I think of goddess Durga or Durga Ma. In Hindi, Ma means mother, so people like call her Durga Ma, which is Mother Durga, and she is the ultimate symbol of feminine power and divinity. So let me tell you a little bit of the story behind her creation. So according to Hindu mythology, as you can see, this is like a very animated picture of a demon who was half bull, half human, and according to mythology, he prayed to the gods and he got a boon that he couldn't be killed by any man or god. So then he terrorized the world and killed people, and there were like and the gods could do nothing about it, like he was spreading terror everywhere. So then the gods together decided to give their energies to create a goddess called Durga, and she was given the power of all these different gods, and they each gave her a different weapon. And this is an image showing how she has 10 hands, and in each hand she holds a weapon from all these different gods, and then she used these weapons to go to battle. And so Durga had a 10-day long battle with this demon called Mahishasur, and then finally on the 10th day she was able to kill the demon. And as you can see, she has all these weapons in her hands, and she uses this trident to kill the demon, and she actually rides a lion, which in itself shows how ferocious of a warrior she is. And after killing Mahishasur, she represented the win of good over evil, and she became the symbol of strength, courage, resilience. And this story is still is very popular amongst Hindus and Indian mythology. So that's why every year we have this 10-day long festival, and it's called Navratri. So she fought the demon for 9 days. So during Navratri, for those 9 days, people either fast, pray, celebrate in all their different ways, and each day is supposed to represent a different form of Ma Durga, where all these different images here are different incarnations of her, and all these different incarnations represent different values that Ma Durga represents, such as wisdom, strength, courage, fearlessness, purity, grace, nurturing. So all these different roles or incarnations can also be seen as different qualities and traits that women hold. So a woman needs to balance so many different roles in her life, like the role of a mother, the role of a woman, the role of a working woman. Women are often managing so many things together. So Ma Durga kind of represents the perfect balance of all these different roles and holding it all together, showing how a woman can be both compassionate and fierce, nurturing and strong. And Ma Durga is the mother goddess representing this all. So that's why all these different roles are worshipped on different days, kind of respecting all these roles that she played, and also in turn representing the roles that a woman plays. So moving on a little from the history behind Ma Durga, I want to tell you about where I am from. So I'm from Kolkata, which is in the state West Bengal, which is in red over here, from the country of India. And Kolkata is the place where Ma Durga is celebrated the most, with so much passion and celebration and reverence. So this is a picture of the idol of Ma Durga from my apartment complex. Like, this is right below my house. And so the history is that for every year, Ma Durga comes to earth for 10 days, and these 10 days, as I was saying, is celebrated as Navratri or Durga Puja, and it's celebrated in different ways across India. So in my city, Kolkata, it's celebrated as Durga Puja for 10 days in a year, and it happens every year, and it's a huge festival. So it's said that it was started somewhere around 1500s, and this festival is yet UNESCO recognized today. And during the festival, we have something called pandals everywhere, and I'll show you pictures later. So pandals are these temporary structures which hold the statues, which holds a statue of Durga Ma, and people go there to pray or to offer her their respects. And there are street vendors everywhere selling various things, and usually it's really good food. And there's music everywhere, and like the entire city comes alive. So to show you an example of what I'm talking about, I'll show you this video.
Kolkata, a city of viceroys, artists and Bengali babus. And this aristocratic city is known to be pretty laid back for 355 days of the year. But for the remaining 10, comes to town, Kolkata can't stop celebrating. There's this electric energy pulsating through the city during this 10-day mega festival that is Durga Puja. And when the city streets turn into a sea of humanity, there's only one thing you can do: just get swept away.
It's a much longer video, but as you can see, this represents a little bit of the chaos that is everywhere around the city. So, as it was said in the video, so Kolkata turns into this electrifying place, but beneath that electrifying energy, there is this reverence of Ma Durga for what she represents. And that is the fact that in this male dominated patriarchal world, this entire community, millions of people just come together to worship this one figure. And there are like lines which are 5 hours long just to see like this one pandal and to worship her and to pay her your respects. So what does Durga Ma mean to me? To me, this is the fact that a woman is so revered and respected, to me is like a break from the patriarchy, and it shows me that women hold so much power within them and can and deserve people's respect. And it makes me believe that if people can pay so much respect to this goddess, then people can also pay respect and make room for women to hold power in this world. And so growing up around Durga Ma in this city where she's so revered, I kind of ingrained this in myself that ingrained it in myself that I am powerful. And so moving to the next slide, I wanted to show how I kind of grew up with like figures of Durga Ma everywhere. So that's a photo of me with my mom, and behind, I know you can't clearly see it, but there's a pandal, like a structure where her statue is kept. Actually, this picture is the picture of the statue which was kept in my apartment complex, and like a little structure which is made. And in this picture, like in the background, that is kind of the scenery there. And the second picture is me when I'm like 17 years old with my friends, and in the background again is like you can see the back side of the pandal, and the statue is kept like inside there. So for like all my life, every year I have celebrated Durga Puja, and this has represented this to me, this has represented strength and power. And to give you a few more examples, like in Kolkata, people are taught how to draw like the face of Durga Ma, and it's like considered very easy. So during Durga Puja, we had a drawing contest, and I drew the face of Durga Ma. And in fact, like I remember winning some position there. And this is just me saying how like in like from the time that you're a child, you learn how to draw like this goddess figure, and throughout your life you're kind of paying your respects to her. Like during Durga Puja, I used to do dances. I used to I danced to the music of the dhol, which you actually heard in the music video. Like the music playing was the sound of the dhol. So so basically that is why Durga Ma plays a huge role in my life to this date. I often say this phrase called Jai Mata Di, which is kind of like calling out to her to give you strength, but in reality it's more like you channeling the strength within you. It's like how people from different religions often, like when you think about your God, so in difficult moments I think about her to give me strength. So moving on from that, I wanted to show you examples of these beautiful pandals in Kolkata. So that's a pandal themed star on the theme of Starry Night, which is a famous painting by Van Gogh. And then this is another pandal, and this kind of shows you all the chaos and the lines to enter the pandal. And then this is another one, and all these pandals are just great works of art in itself, and people often go there for its beauty, and also of course to pay their respects to Durga Ma. So some important traditions that we partake in during Durga Puja are, one is playing of the shell, where people have these shells. I don't know if you have ever seen it, but people blow on these shells to play to like, there's this sound that comes out. It's like a natural sound because the shell is supposed to be hollow from the inside. So when you blow on it, it plays a sound and it's considered to be an auspicious sound. And then there is the Dhunuchi dance, where people kind of hold those smoking pots in their hands, and some talented people also hold it in their mouth, and they dance in front of Durga Ma, again kind of paying her their respects to her. I have also done the Dhunuchi dance because in my complex we used to have these friendly Dhunuchi dance competitions, but I have never held one in my mouth. That's too much risk taking. So that is one form of paying respects to Durga Ma. And then there is the Sindoor play, which is where people play with vermilion, which is kind of a red powder that women wear in many Hindu traditions during marriage. So people play with that during Durga Puja. And then there is Garba and Dandiya, which is a dance form, which is especially prevalent in Eastern India, where people, like throughout Navratri for those 9 days, they partake in these complicated, awesome dance routines, and they dance in a circle, and it's really amazing. And then there is the dhol in the right side, which I was talking about. Like, people hit these dhols, which are like drums, to play these sounds, which you heard in the YouTube video as well. And like, for me, whenever I heard the sound of a dhol, I knew it was time for Durga Ma to come and for all the enjoyment to begin. And lastly, in the middle, there is the Kanya Puja, which I think is one of the most fascinating traditions, where women who are below the age of 12 or 13 years like are called to people's homes, and usually it's 9 women, and these 9 women represent the different form incarnations of Durga Ma, and they are fed, they are given gifts, people touch their feet for blessings, because these little women's blessings are supposed to be sacred. And I think that it also resembles, like, telling women from a young age that you have so much power and strength, and your blessings are sacred to other people. So I, as a child, I loved going to people's homes, eating good food. In fact, I used to go to so many homes that there was a point where I couldn't eat anymore, but I just went for all the gifts. So, so it was quite fun. And lastly, I want to tell you about how I have carried Durga Ma with me to Grinnell. Okay. That's us playing Dandiya in Gardner last semester. And then lastly, this is my performance during cultural evening, where I performed on this song called Mahishasur Mardini, which represents Durga Ma killing the demon and is kind of a devoting song to her. And I performed Bharatnatyam, which is a dance form on cultural evening. So basically, I just wanted to say, like in Kolkata, we say Ashte Bochor Aber Hobe, which means that next year it will happen again. Durga Ma will come every year, bringing hope and joy and strength. So, thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic. Fantastic. I love to see all the variety of different women that you all called out and showcased today. It's incredible. We'll take a couple questions. One quick thing I'll say, I feel like our celebrations are a little boring compared to what I just saw. That looked awesome.
Is that celebration done the same time every year?
It's actually done on like different dates according to some calendar that they use, some holy calendar, I don't know, but it's always 10 days long, and sometime around October or September, end of September or October, yeah.
You said there's a food. What's your favorite food? What would you go for first in the celebration?
I love these little sweets we have called rasgulla, which are little things which are white, and you put them in your mouth and it just pops, and it's so sweet, and it's just amazing.
Awesome. Liam, I have one question for you real quick. You talked a little bit back to schools and how the Japanese government had taken over schools. What were schools like before that? I wanted to get a sense of how, I mean, you talked about the language, and obviously then it probably was very much focused on only Japanese history, but I was just, instead of Korean history, I'm just curious of were schools like before that?
So basically, both Japanese and Korean, we both use Chinese letter, but just the way of reading things are different. So basically, like, based on same letter, we read and speak a different way. But what Japanese did is try to fix those, the way of reading to follow how they do in Japan. So actually, Korean language, which I use in this day, we call it as Hangul, is rediscovered during the period under the Japanese Empire, because people wanted to find what is the origin of the language they use in Korea, who made this kind of way of reading of Chinese letter things. So yeah, so the school before that period is actually just same textbook and same topic, same subject, but just the point is that Japanese, they forced students to read those textbooks based on Japanese way, not Korean way they used to do throughout the history.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you. Please help me give a round of applause. Incredible. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was an amazing treat, I have to say. Please come back anytime you want, either to hear presentations or give more presentations. Really, really delighted to have you all here. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. All right. We are back at it again next week. Next week is sorry, my paper over here. One of two-part series that Dr. J.R. Paulson is going to give. I want to make sure I have the right title here. Coping, Parenting, and Grandparenting in the Digital Age. Dr. Paulson has done a lot of research around books regarding, how today's technologies are really impacting all of us, and especially our youth. So next week is part one of two parts. So please tell everyone about it, and we'll see you here next week. Thank you so much.